10 years after the prairie wind carried away the laughter from his house, Elias Boone still woke before dawn, built the fire, and rode fence lines until the stars came out again. The ranch had grown older with him boards dry and split, hinges moaning in the wind, the corral half leaning as though it, too, were tired of standing guard over ghosts. Every night he ate alone at the same table where Annie, his wife, had once set coffee beside his plate and teased him about the dust in his beard. The first few years after she passed, neighbors rode out with food and conversation, but the visits dwindled. Folks said Boone didn't need company, that he'd made peace with silence. They were wrong. Silence had become the only thing that would still have him. That evening the wind changed. It came down from the north, dry and cold, stirring the curtains like a breath from another time. Boone had just poured his coffee when a horse's hoofbeats rolled up the valley. He frowned. No one called at sundown unless it was trouble. He stepped to the porch, shotgun resting easy in his hands, and saw a lone rider crest the hill. The setting sun flared behind her, turning dust into gold. The rider swung down, her coat brushing her boots, and for a heartbeat Boone thought he was seeing Annie again. But the face that looked up through the half-light was Clara, Annie's younger sister, the girl who'd wept through the funeral and vanished, east with a letter she never mailed. "Evenin', Elias," she said, voice rough from travel. "You look like you seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," he answered. The words came out softer than he meant. She smiled, small and uncertain. "Mind if I water my horse?" He nodded, still trying to find sense in the sight of her there after all these years. When she walked past him, the scent of rain and long miles filled the doorway, and the house felt smaller, more alive, as if the air remembered what it was to move. Inside, Clara told him of the drought back east, the railroad job that fell apart, the family she'd lost to sickness. She'd nowhere left but here. Boone listened, silent except for the creak of his chair. Her eyes wandered the cabin, the photographs, the folded blanket on the rocker, and lingered on Annie's guitar hanging by the hearth. "You kept it," she said. "Couldn't make myself let it go." The fire popped, sending sparks like memories into the dark. For the first time in years, Boone realized he didn't want the night to end. Yet guilt settled, heavy on his chest because, sitting there across from Clara, felt like standing on holy ground he had no right to tread. When she rose to turn in, he offered her the spare room, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and unspoken words. "You sure, Elias?" she asked at the doorway. He nodded. Plenty of space. Been empty too long. Later, he sat alone on the porch, moonlight silvering the fence posts, coyotes calling in the distance. Behind him, he could hear her moving softly, settling into a house that had forgotten laughter. Something inside him shifted, just a breath but enough to stir the ashes. The prairie night stretched wide and endless, and for the first time in 10 years, Boone wasn't entirely alone. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, maybe reckoning, maybe redemption, but he felt the old world turn, slow and patient, toward whatever was coming. Morning broke slow over the valley, spilling light across the grass like liquid gold. Elias Boone was already in the corral, hammering a loose board back into place, when Clara stepped out of the house wearing one of Annie's old work shirts. The sight of her, their sleeves rolled, hair tied back, eyes steady, stopped him mid-swing. For a heartbeat he felt time fold in on itself, the past and present sharing one long breath. Then the hammer fell again, and the sound scattered the ghosts. The first weeks passed in a rhythm neither of them planned. Clara cooked, tended the small garden Annie had once planted, and kept the house from slipping completely into memory. Boone rode fence, broke a young sorrel colt, and found himself checking the windows when he came back down the trail, as if making sure she hadn't vanished. At night they talked beside the fire. The talk was easy, about storms, about neighbors, about the way the sky never stopped changing, but under the words something else moved, like water under ice. One evening a rider came fast from town, Deputy Miles, dust-caked and grim. "Trouble," he said. "Cattle rustlers workin' the North Ridge. Sheriff's raisin' a posse at first light." Boone nodded. The Boone ranch might be small now, but the brand still meant something. He told Clara not to worry and began checking his rifle. She followed him to the barn. "You don't have to prove anything, Elias," she said. "Out here, not standin' up is the same as invitin' trouble," he replied. Then promise me you'll come back." He looked at her, saw the same fear that had lived in Annie's eyes the morning he rode to fetch a doctor, who came too late. He wanted to promise more than he could, but the only words that came were quiet. "I'll do my best." At dawn the posse rode out. Dust rose behind them like smoke. The trail led through dry canyons where the sun baked the color out of the rocks. When they found the rustlers, 3 men with stolen cattle and mean eyes, the fight was quick and close. Boone's rifle barked once, then again, and the echo hung in the cliffs. When the smoke cleared, one man lay wounded, another fled, and Boone had a bullet crease across his shoulder. By the time he reached home, the sky had turned purple. Clara was on the porch, lantern in hand. Her face went pale when she saw the blood. "It's not bad," he said, but his knees betrayed him, and she caught him before he hit the ground. Through the long night she cleaned the wound, bound it tight, and sat beside him until the fever broke. Boone drifted in and out, hearing her humming an old Annie's tune, soft and cracked but steady as heartbeat. When he woke clear-headed, dawn was breaking again. Clara slept in the chair beside the bed, hands still resting near his. He studied her face, tired, strong, lined by the same hard years that had marked him. In that quiet, he realized the ache he'd carried wasn't just grief, it was the fear of living again. Weeks later, when he could ride, he took her out along the ridge. Below them the valley opened wide, grass waving under a sky so big it could hold every sorrow and still have room for hope. "I never thank you," he said. "For what?" "For reminding this place it was still alive." She smiled. "You did that yourself, Elias. I just knocked." They laughed, and the sound rolled down into the pasture where the cattle grazed, blending with the wind. That night the house glowed warm through the dark, to shadows moving inside where once there had been only one. Out on the prairie, the coyotes sang, and somewhere beyond the hills the future waited wild, uncertain, but theirs to ride toward.